Well, good evening and welcome to the Arbor Hills Nature Preserve in Plano, Texas. Tonight's exercise is a field test of the Sofirn IF23. I want to thank Sofirn for sending me the light and making the review possible. This is a 21700 base light. It definitely has some heft to it. You feel it when you pick it up. Mag base, if you like that, two-way clip, USB-C charging port on the side, and the single control switch here. Output modes are spot, flood, combined spot and flood, constant on color, or blinking color. Within spot or flood, you have the usual suspects: moonlight, low, medium, high, turbo. I suppose the marketing folks wanted to have every single conceivable box checked, so you also have access to strobe, SOS, beacon. Within spot and flood, you have the ability to either go through the steps that I just enumerated, or you can switch to stepless or ramped output. There is electronic lockout as well as something called automatic lockout. I'll get to that shortly. As you can imagine, a lot of potential output levels, a lot of potential state transitions. There's one and only one control switch. All I can do is click or press and hold. So get ready for single, double, triple, quad clicks. Press and hold. What mode are you in? What output level are you in? Is the light on, off? It can get very involved depending on how you intend to use the light. But let's step back and talk about that automatic lockout. I think that's an aspect of the UI you probably need to take into consideration very early. The light is on, then turned off and left off for more than 3 minutes. It automatically goes into lockout mode. So I have the light off now. My expectation would be, if I single clicked from off, that it would turn on in spot. I single click and I get a double flash instead. That is the indication that the light is currently in lockout because I've had it off for a considerable period of time. I did not manually lock the light out. You have to double click to turn it on from there, and it will go into whichever mode was most recently accessed between spot or flood. So the first thing you'll notice about that is, why did I turn the light on in the first place? I turned it on because I needed the light. Did I get the light? No, I got the lockout indication. I had to go through an extra step to get the light on. You're also forced to remember, which was I in most recently? Spot or flood? What if you can't remember and you were in flood? Well, you get that double flash, then you double click. I've noticed a lot of people, when they use an underhanded hold, they'll look down at the light to manipulate it, and that results in a slight upward cant. So if you double click and that flood comes on, you're going to get a burst of flood in the face. Probably not what you wanted. All right, maybe you're thinking, okay, if the light is off for any period of time, I'll just know that I'm in lockout and I'll automatically double click. Yes, you can do that, and if you were most recently in spot, that will give you what you want. But there are a couple of issues. First of all, you have to remember that. What if you don't remember how long you had it off and it's less than 3 minutes? Double click is from off, double click is the shortcut to flood. So you can still get a face full of flood when you didn't mean to. Then to get back to spot, you're going to have to turn the light off, then turn it right back on. Well, why do we have automatic lockout in the first place? Don't know if you can see it here. That switch is raised quite considerably. Now, normally, if this were a purely cylindrical form factor, I might not mind that because it means that if I'm using this in the dark, all I have to do is move my thumb across the top portion of the light, and it's very easy for me to locate where that switch is in the dark. I can do it entirely by feel, even with light gloves on. Well, I don't really need to have that with this particular design. I can either use the clip as a guide, put my middle finger approximately right there, very easy to do by feel. I have average size hands. As I rotate my thumb forward, it's right on the switch area. If I'm not using the clip, I can take my thumb, put it right here in this recessed area where the output of the flood is, and just move it up like this until I feel the end, rotate my thumb forward, and I'm right on the switch. So if there's a fear of accidental activation, why have that switch raised in the first place? It's not needed. In the second place, it doesn't guarantee me any protection against accidental activation if I've had the light off for less than 3 minutes. I could still stuff it into a pocket, be moving around, and have this accidentally press up against my body. If the light has been turned off for less than 3 minutes, in this case, it doesn't take much pressure against that to turn it back on. So under 3 minutes, auto lockout is no guarantee that I'm not going to have an accidental activation. But does this really make any difference? I would argue that the first question is not the UI. The first question is performance. If this light has demonstrable performance benefits in an area that is important to you, well, then the UI becomes an issue. You have to weigh issues with the UI, carry, deployment, etc. against the benefits. If the light has no demonstrable benefit in an area that is important to you, then the UI discussion is moot. This is why I like field testing. And on that subject, it's time for me to quit talking, let the light do the talking. I'm going to let the sun go down a little bit more, then go out in the preserve, and we'll see exactly what this light can do. I'm at the bridge where I normally do output level test in low spot. I'm going to move over here to potentially maximize my line of sight, then up one into medium, again to high, double click to turbo, and I'm going to hold the light fixed and rotate the iPhone so you can get an idea of the field of view. And yes, it's getting very hot. And if you wanted to go to strobe, you would have to double click again, and then that would give you a mechanism to cycle through the strobe SOS beacon combination. I've moved off to the right, low flood, medium, high, turbo. All right, there's the solid color. I'm just going to press and hold. Okay, that's very roughly a cycle, and then double click goes to flashing. Double click again back to solid. This is the first practical exercise of the evening, a simple close proximity search here at the playground in medium flood. I'm only going to run the fixed output levels tonight, and this just simulates a situation where something was lost here earlier. Now you have to come back and search for it. And what's the lowest mode of illumination that I can do a decent search for a small object, say inside of 8, maybe 10 yards, and this gives you an idea of how the flood performs in that capacity. I always like to do a path following example with a lot of lights. If you're jammed up, you're out a lot later than you thought, this is the only light you've got. What's the lowest mode you need to follow a very groomed path? Well, you would definitely want the spot mode. This is the low output level, and this is a surprisingly strong output level. I can get good downrange, I can get low here, I can see information about the terrain ahead, I can get up, I could pick up eye shine out there well over 25 yards. So this is a surprisingly powerful mode. When I run this test with a lot of other lights, to get at least this level of performance, I would have to be in a medium output level. Now we're looking over another creek. You can't see the creek, but a good 33, 35 yards maximum line of sight in spot mode, medium output level. This is entrance to the outer loop trail. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know the drill. About 24-ish to the sign. Then the distance increases as I go across the tree line here. Then it gets a little closer, and then back out again as the path moves off to the right. In high now, there are two tree lines. You can see the front, the trees behind them continue moving off to the left. Then once I get to that tree right in front of me, I keep moving off. It's well over a football field line of sight. I can see that there are trees out there, but I can only get minimal detail. I could do light detection at this range, but not identification. Let's move a little bit closer. Even at closer distances, again, identification would be a little bit problematic. Throw and punch are not the big features of this light. It's just too low candela. But that's why we do field tests. And here is turbo. The first gap in the trees, just past that is about 95 yards. Then there is a second tree line in the distance. I can see a tree out there, but I can't make out much detail. That is over 175. Again, a very wide field of view as I keep the light fixed and rotate the iPhone. Definitely a lot of heat buildup, so what I'm going to do is keep this on for a couple minutes so that we can observe regulation, which is already starting to happen. And as you can see, it's pretty aggressive. Pan back and forth there. Of course, while the light is hot, it is not as hot as it was when I first turned it on. And this seems in line with some of the theoretical or lab measurements that I've seen online regarding this light. A very aggressive initial step down, then a steady state, then I can't remember the exact time, I think it's maybe an hour 20, it starts sawtoothing up and down. So we are at what appears to be a steady state, and I can just barely see at or back of that gap. I think from a practical standpoint, you could do detection out to maybe 100, even with the light pollution from the surrounding city. Identifications, you'd probably want to be well inside 75, and we've run it to over 2 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and shut this down, let the light cool down, and we'll run some more tests. So here's an example of the mag base and simultaneous flood and spot. What I found is that if you try to put the mag base on something curved like this, after you get to more than about a 30-40 degree angle, it has a tendency to fall. But if it's perpendicular to a good smooth flat surface, you're good to go. Now, why would you want this mode? Because the two outputs are in different direction. I might use this if I move it further down. If I'm examining something in the trees here, move it down to say right here, and then I still want to have a little light downrange. This is in medium, by the way. I can go higher than this. Okay, so now there's high, and so I can look over here in the trees, maybe get a slightly different angle, get two beams working together. There's the spot from my headlamp. Another application might be when I'm staging gear for a search and rescue operation. I'll normally have everything set up on my truck, and I'll be using a cap light until I get my SAR bump helmet on. So sometimes it might be beneficial to have a light downrange of the back of my pickup, and maybe I'm working in this direction, so I've at least still got some decent light to my back. Those are kind of the only practical things that I can think of right now. Let's move on, and then we'll finish tonight's exercise up. So how does this light work in tandem with a headlamp? A lot of people like to just get out and do night hiking. They have a very typical low to intermediate lumen AA or AAA headlamp. I've got my SAR headlamp on right now at a 400 lumen flood, which is kind of the high end for a typical hiking headlamp. So I could definitely make detections at that far tree line. I could tell that maybe there was eye shine in there, but I'm maxed out on the headlamp. Let's say I need something else to make an identification. Well, you've got to get over the auto lock issue with the Sofirn. One way to do that is just pre-stage the light. I've got it low, and just leave it in low the entire night. You can run it an awfully long time on low. Low doesn't quite get there, so let's bump it up to medium. Medium is a very good complement. If I needed to see just a little further in that tree line, I could go up to high, and that gets the job done. And then one back around to low, and then as I move on, I can sweep the IF23 back and forth in low. I don't have to worry about the auto lock nonsense. And so this could make a very good complement to a typical low or mid-end hiking headlamp. We are in high. This is an area that I do a lot of wrap-ups. A good 55 plus yards max line of sight, and I'm just going to let this burn down while I do a quick wrap-up. I hope you saw enough in terms of feature and capability to make a decision in terms of what the light offers. If you do find something you like, well, you're going to have to go back and address the UI. And the way I recommend doing that is be very specific about your use case or use cases, and on a case-by-case basis, go through the complete thought experiment of how the light would be used and how fault tolerant it is. And by fault tolerant, I mean things like what happens if you blow a triple click? And it does happen. Everyone who says, oh, I can triple click without any problem. I've taught night hiking and night operations courses for years. I've probably had over 100 people come through these courses, and the louder they talk about the ability to do a triple click, then you put them out under realistic circumstances. You stress them out or put them in a temperature condition like really cold weather. Maybe they're wearing gloves. You can definitely see some step down now. It's easy to blow a triple click. I evaluate different lights all the time with different switches that I'm not familiar with. Yes, I blow triple clicks. The easiest thing that happens is that you do a real quick double click, then just a slight hesitation, and it's interpreted as a double followed by a single. So let me give you an example. You want to use this light for night hiking. You don't care about auto lock because you intend on getting out of the vehicle, getting ready, and pre-staging it in low spot. You intend to use spot 90% of the time, occasional flood. So your thought experiment is, okay, how do I get from spot, which is my primary output mode, to the occasional output mode, which is flood? That's a triple click. Okay, if you make the triple click, great. What happens if you do a double single? Well, from spot, the worst thing that would happen to you is The double takes you to turbo, the single takes you back to where you were. So you just made a big round trip from where you were back to where you were. Now you have to triple click and go into flood. All right, you do your work in flood, how do you get back to spot? Quickest way to do that's turn the light off, turn it right back on, kind of like a slow double click. All right, that's the thought experiment. Are you okay with that? Is that a constant mode of usage that you are comfortable with? Well, then you have to think of how you're going to carry and deploy the light, weigh all of that against the features. Another example, you're using it around the campground, mostly in flood, with occasional use in spot, and you do like the idea of having the colored lights on, maybe inside the tent. Well, the double single problem there doesn't really affect you that much. You're in the tent. The double click turns you from constant color on to flashing color. Then the next single click turns the light off. Well, now the light is off, so you have to very quickly turn it back on, get to where you need to be. You just have to remember that if you go back to the colored output, you're going to be in flashing, not constant on. All right, there's the thought experiment. Does that work for you in the way that you intend to use the light? And the only person who can answer that question is you. If you try to get someone else to answer it for you, you may get the wrong answer. So that's what I recommend, is just a series of thought experiments on how you actually intend to use the light, and then you can make a determination if the UI is too complicated or if it's not right for you or whatever. Let me pan around just a bit here, since we are in what appears to be a steady state. I'll answer the one question that's likely to come up, and I'll just give you an honest answer. Would I personally use this light? And the answer is no. Let's run that thought experiment. My primary use case is wilderness search and rescue. This has a magnetic base. If I were to use this light, I would want to have it probably mounted roughly chest high for quick access, and that would place something magnetic in relatively close proximity to where I would use my lensatic compass, and compass is a significant part of my overall land nav strategy. So I would not use it just on that basis. I don't like the auto lock. I don't like certain aspects of the ramping. I don't have need of all the colors for night videography. I have a number of other options that allow me to continuously vary both the hue of the light as well as the intensity. So even outside of search and rescue, I just don't have a good use case for it. So it doesn't meet that litmus test of, does it provide me with some demonstrable benefit above and beyond what I already have. So that's another example of how you would match the capability of the light to a specific use case. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and shut it down for tonight. You listened to me for an awfully long time, so congratulations. Pat yourself on the back. I'm definitely tired of listening to myself. So as always, until the next review, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for watching the video.